Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Chaf Beis Amud Beis 22b of Maseches Kiddushin. We are 3 lines from the bottom of the page. The Gemara was discussing different ways in which a person can acquire an Eved Kanani, a Canaanite slave. One of the ways was bechazaka, through an act that demonstrates possession. And the Gemara brought a brisa that explained that if the Eved Kanani, if the Canaanite does some kind of act of service to the Jewish man, that can act as a means of acquisition. So the Gemara, 3 lines from the bottom, in the middle, it brings a little maisa, a little story. Rabbi Yehuda Hindua, ger she'en lo yarshin hava. Rabbi Yehuda, the Hindu, the Indian, I guess, he was a convert from India. And because he was a convert, he didn't have any yarshin, inheritors. Meaning when somebody's not a convert, it's almost probably impossible not to have any inheritors, because if you don't have children, then you go up to the next generation, and then sideways to the brothers, uncles, up another generation, whichever way you need to go. So, but a convert, the halacha is gerish niskayer kikatan shenola dami. That when a person converts, they are like they're reborn. They no longer have a relative connection. They're no longer related to their relatives from a halachic standpoint. So he didn't have any yarshin, nobody to inherit him, and he was the owner of a Canaanite slave. So Chalash, he got very sick, Rabbi Yehuda, and Mar Zutra went to visit him and see how he was doing. Chazye detakif le alma tuva. He saw that Rabbi Yehuda Hindua was very, very sick. He saw that it was basically time for him to leave the world. So Amar Leila Abde, but Mar Zutra said to the slave of Rabbi Yehuda Hindua, Shlof li misani, remove my shoe, v'amtinu lebesa, and bring it to my house. So his intent here was that he would have the Eved do an act of service to him, thereby acquiring him. The issue here, right, was that if the Rabbi Yehuda was to pass away, and then he has no yarshin, he has nobody to inherit him, so then the slave would take possession of himself, because he would become ownerless, and then he could claim himself. However, so Rabbi Mar Zutra had this slave do an act of service to him that thereby could act as his means of acquisition. So the Gemara says, Ika da'amri gadol hava. Some say that the slave was an adult, and that's how he would have been able to take possession of himself, because he has das to do so. And Zeh Piresh Lamisa, we're now on the top of the Chaf Gimel and Aleph 23a. Zeh Piresh Lamisa, the Rabbi Yehuda, the Hindu, he separated. He went to death. V'Zeh Piresh L'chaim, and Mar Zutra, he went in the direction of life, meaning instead, meaning he replaced him in their relationship with the slave. That he sort of acted like an inheritor almost, except it wasn't through the means of inheritance, but he went to death and he went to life, meaning he replaced him and became the owner of the slave. V'ika da'amri katan hava. Some say the slave was a child, was a katan. Now, if he's a katan, can he take possession of himself or not? So that is actually a machlokas, it's a dispute, and the opinion that's saying here that it was a katan, that it was a child, and it was necessary still for him to take possession, to do this act of possession in advance, so that he wouldn't be able to take possession of himself, that is even necessary for a child. Udeloka Abashal, but that would not be like the opinion of Abashal. D'Tanya, because we have a brisa that teaches, ger shemes, if a convert dies, and he has no yarshim, he has no inheritors, ubizbezu Yisrael nechasav, and so other Jews come and they loot, they collect his possessions because nobody owns them. V'hayu b'hen avadim, and amongst his possessions were slaves. Ben gedolim, ben ketanim, whether they were adult slaves, whether they were children. Kanu atzman b'nei chorin. They acquire themselves. If the convert dies, he has no inheritors. So his slaves are now ownerless, and they can acquire themselves. So the first opinion here is that they can acquire themselves whether they are adults or whether they are children, and that children have the ability to acquire themselves. And that would be the opinion that our story would be in line with, assuming it was a child. Then it could fall into that opinion, because it would be saying that the child could have taken possession of himself if there was no act of chazaka done in advance. But because Mar Zutra did this act of chazaka in advance, or really, I wonder, probably wouldn't work to doing it in advance. He had to do it. It had to be that while at the moment that Rabbi Yehuda died, the slave was in the act of servicing Mar Zutra. That's probably what was going on here. So as soon as he died, he was in the act of servicing him. He couldn't take possession of himself. Mar Zutra took possession of him. And it would be saying that even if he is a child, it was necessary for Mar Zutra to do this, because otherwise the child would have taken possession of himself. But the Brisa goes on and it says, Abba Shaul says, Gedolim kanu atzman b'nei chorin. Adult slaves could acquire themselves if their owner dies with no inheritors. Ketanim, but children, kol hamachzik b'hen zachar, whoever would grab them, whoever would take possession of them, will take possession of them. And so according to Abba Shaul, it wasn't necessary for Mar Zutra to have the slave, if he was a child, to have him do an act of possession, an act of servicing in advance, or during that moment, because he could take possession of it afterwards, because the child couldn't take possession of himself. However, according to the Tanakama, the child could take possession of himself, and therefore it would have been necessary for Abba Shaul to do this, for Mar Zutra to do this, and that's why Mar Zutra did it, and it would be going like that first opinion. Okay. Now the Mishnah had said that a Canaanite slave can acquire himself back in a number of ways. It said there were different opinions in the Mishnah. The first opinion was the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said, back on Chaf Beis Amar Beis, 22b in the middle in the Mishnah, V'kones atzmo bekesef al yedei achirim, that the Canaanite slave could acquire himself back with money from others, not his own money, it has to be coming from others. Uvishtar al yedei atzmo, and through a document, a get shichur, a bill of divorce, a bill of freedom, al yedei atzmo, himself, if that bill was handed to him. So if it's money, he needs other people to hand the money to his owner. If it's the bill of freedom, it has to be that the owner hands it to him. That's what it seems to be that Rabbi Meir is saying. Says the Gemara, "B'kesef al yedei achirim in, aval lo al yedei atzmo." It sounds like, according to Rabbi Meir, if he's being freed with money, it has to be that other people give the money. It can't be that he gives the money. B'may askinan. So ask the Gemara, what's the case here? If you're telling me the case is that the slave doesn't know about it even, that others are paying the master money to free the slave, and this is without the slave's knowledge, he doesn't even know. So that can't be. Why? Because let's examine, Shamana le Rabbi Meir, we know that Rabbi Meir says, De'amar chov hu le'ebed sheyetzeh miyad rabo lecheres, that it is an obligation against him, it's a detriment to the slave to be freed from his master. Because while he's a slave, I guess he has certain needs met. Rashi points out that if in a situation where the master was a Kohen, the slave was able to eat Truma, now he can't eat Truma. If he was free, that's if it was a Kohen. Additionally, if he was a Yisrael, if the master was a Yisrael, when the slave is still a slave, he can marry a shifcha, he can marry a maidservant. Once he's freed, he completes his process of conversion, he can't marry a maidservant. So he's losing out in a certain way. So Rabbi Meir says, because he's losing out, this is detrimental to him, to be freed. V'tanina, and we learn in a brisa, zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav, we are allowed to merit someone, not in front of them, meaning we can award somebody something that's good, even not in front of them, even without their knowledge. So I could decide to give somebody something that's good without them knowing, and using the right form of transaction, but it could actually become theirs. Let's say I give something valuable to you, and you pick it up on behalf of someone else. That could work because we're awarding that person something. And zafin la'adam shelo b'fanav, you can award something to someone not in front of them. However, ve'ein chavin lo ela b'fanav, but you cannot obligate him except for in front of him. You can't, something that's a detriment to him, you will not be able to do without his consent. So here, if Rabbi Meir holds that for a slave to be freed is a detriment to him, then we can't do it without his consent. So when it says that he could be freed with kesef, with money, al yedei achirim, coming from others, that somebody else will come along, he wants to help the slave, he goes and he frees him. Well, according to Rabbi Meir, that's not helping him. That's a detriment to him. And if it's a detriment to him, then he can't do it without his consent. So elo pshita midaitos. Then it's obvious it must be that this is happening with his knowledge, with his agreement. That when we say that others can free him with kesef, with money, it means with his consent. V'hakamashmalan, and what would it be teaching us? It would be teaching us al yedei achirim ing al yedei atzmo lo. That's still, the Mishnah is saying, Rabbi Meir is saying, only others can free him, but he can't free himself with money. Why not? So Alma, we see, ein kinyan la'eved below rabbo. That it must be that, at least according to Rabbi Meir, a eved, a slave, cannot make a kinyan, cannot acquire anything without his master, meaning whatever he acquires must go directly to the master. So he can't free himself, because any money that he gets immediately becomes the master's. So the money has to be coming from someone else to the master. So that's what it would be saying. But asks the Gemara, Ihachi, if that's true, if we're talking about that it's midaito, if we're talking about that the Eved is aware of what's going on, Ema Seifa, but let's try to read the Seifa, let's try to read the next step of the Mishnah. The next step says, Bishtar al yedei atzmo. It says that the Eved, the slave, can be freed with the shtar, with a bill of freedom, a bill of separation, al yedei atzmo, on his own. So if the master gives him the bill of freedom, he goes free. And the implication is al yedei atzmo in. If he accepts it, then it works. Al yedei achirim lo. But others cannot accept it. V'i midaito. If we're talking about where he gave consent, al yedei achirim amai lo. Why can't somebody else accept it on his behalf? If we were talking about that he didn't know about it, he didn't give consent, then we understand he can't accept it on his behalf because ein chavin la'adam shelo b'fanav. He can't do something to his detriment without his consent. Can't make a transaction that's to his detriment without his consent. But since we said we're talking about where he does give consent, so then why can't somebody else accept the shtar, the document that frees him, on his behalf? V'chitema, and if you'll tell me you're reading the Mishnah wrong. My al yedei atzmo, when the Mishnah says that he can accept the shtar on his own, it means af al yedei atzmo, even on his own. Meaning not only, maybe the Mishnah is saying when it says he could accept the shtar on his own, it means even on his own. Certainly somebody else could accept it, but even he could accept it. And it would be teaching me that his get and his hand come at the same time. In other words, it's something novel actually that the Eved even has the ability to accept the document, because we said before he doesn't have yad. Yad means a hand, but it means he's not able to take possession of things. As soon as he takes possession of something, it becomes the master's. That's what we said when it comes to money. Right? He can't have his own money because if you give him money, it becomes the master's. So in order to get freed with a document, he has to get the document and take possession of it. But he can't take possession of it because as soon as he takes possession of it, it becomes the master's. So how's this going to work? How is he going to get the document and to possess it so that now he can be free? Because he says, I hold the document of freedom. As soon as he gets it, it belongs to the master. The master can't give him anything. So we have this concept that we say gito v'yado ba'im ke'echad. That actually it can happen simultaneously. It's possible that and the way that Rabbi Meir is holding is that his his bill of freedom and his ability to accept it comes simultaneously. So he is able to acquire it, to take possession of it, because it's this simultaneous thing that as soon at the same moment that he tries to take possession, it becomes effective. It goes into effect that he's now free. So it's a novel idea, but it works according to Rabbi Meir. That wouldn't work for the money, because the money, there's another step. He doesn't go free when he gets the money. He goes free when he then gives the money to the master. So that it's not going to help you. But for the bill of divorce, we have this concept that it's simultaneous. As soon as he receives it, we say he's free, and that's how he could take possession. It's like it's simultaneous. So that's maybe what it's telling me. Maybe it's telling me that he can even free himself by meaning somebody else certainly can take possession of the document on his behalf. But even he could, because we say this novel idea that his ability to possess the document happens simultaneously with him getting set free. So the Gemara says, V'halo tani hachi, but we have a brisa that says otherwise. Titania, the brisa says, Bishtar alidei atzmo, v'lo alidei acherim. Divrei Rabbi Meir. We have a brisa that says that he can be freed with the shtar, with the document, by himself, but not by others. So we were trying, and it says that's the words of Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir holds. So we were trying to read into the Mishnah that Rabbi Meir holds that not only could he, it's saying even by himself, even if he takes possession. Certainly if you give the shtar to others on his behalf, it works. But even if you give it to him, it works. But the Gemara is saying you can't say that. The Brisa says otherwise. The Brisa says only if you give it to him does it work. If you give it to others, it doesn't work. And the question is, why not? If he gave his consent, why can't they take possession? So Amar Abaye, Abaye says, Le'olam shalom idaito. So he says, forget about all this. It can't be that we're talking about where he gave consent. It must be that he didn't give consent. And that's why they can't accept the bill of divorce the bill of freedom on his behalf, because he never consented, and it's a chov to him, it's a detriment to him. So they can't do it, they can't force him to go free, they can't do it on his behalf. So we have to go back to our questions. Then why are they allowed to give money to free him if it's a chov, it's a detriment to him? You can't do that shalom b'fanav. You can't do that without his consent. So if we're saying it's without his consent, then again, we're back to our original question. So how could they pay money to free him without him agreeing? Says the Gemara, says Abaye v'shani kesef. Money is different. Ho'il v'kani le bal karche, makni le bal karche. Just like the master is able to purchase him against his will, he's also able to sell him against his will. So if others give money to the master, so the master is selling him. And there's nothing the slave could do about it. You don't need his consent. You don't need his consent. So ihachi, so if that's the case, that you don't need his consent, because just like the master bought him against his will, he can also free him against his will. So then, or sell him against his will. So then, shtar nami. So we should say the same thing about our document. Why does Rabbi Meir say that others can't accept the document on his behalf against his will, without his consent? Why not? Just like the master bought him, the master can set him out, let him go, or sell him. So the Gemara says, Hai shtar l'chud v'hai shtar l'chud. The reason is because they're different shtaros, they're different documents. The method that we're now employing to set him free, or to sell him maybe, is a sale, is makni le. The idea is that just like the master bought him against his will, he can sell him against his will. So if somebody gives him money, he can sell him out. He can sell him against his will without his consent. But that can't work with the shtar, at least not the same kind of shtar that we've been talking about. We've been talking about a shtar shichrur, a bill of freedom. A bill of freedom says, hereby set you free, whatever the language is, right? But that's what it's about. It's not about selling him. The idea that we just said, that the master, just like he bought him against his will, he can sell him against his will, that's if he's selling him. so maybe if the document would speak about a sale, maybe that would work. But we're not talking about that kind of document in the Mishnah. We're talking about a shtar shichrur, a document of freedom, a bill of freedom. That doesn't make sense within this framework to say that because the master bought him, he can sell him. We're not talking about selling him. We're talking about setting him free. And who says that the master can use that method of setting him free against his will if it's a detriment to him? So that's why only he can accept the bill of freedom, because at least when it's shalom midaito. If it was midaito, if it was with his consent, then fine. Somebody else could accept it. But we are now learning that the Mishnah is talking about shalom midaito, without his consent. And so only he could be the one to accept the bill of freedom. Rava says a different distinction between the money and the bill, the shtar. Rava says, Kesef Kabbalas Rabo Garmalo, Shtar Kabbalas Acherim Garmalo. Rava says that when it comes to money, what is actually setting the guy free, the slave free? What's setting the slave free is when the master receives the money. And it's not the other people paying that sets him free, it's the master accepting the money that sets him free. And it seems he's saying the master could do that. The master's allowed to set him free if he wants. Our issue of ein chavim la'adam shelo b'fanav, the issue that we raised earlier, that you can't do something that's to his detriment, against his will, so that would be with regard to those other people coming and giving money to the master. It wouldn't work if it's to the detriment of the slave. But that's only true if they are the key players in that transaction. That it's sort of, we will look at it that they are buying him, or they're the ones making it happen. But Rava's saying they're just they happen to be involved, but they're not really the ones that are making it happen. What's actually setting this slave free is the master receiving the money and accepting the money. And that he's able to do. That he's allowed to be makna. He's allowed to set the slave out. It's his possession after all. That would not contradict this halacha, this idea that you can't do something to somebody's detriment against his will. If the master is the one who's doing it, that would not be a contradiction to that. However, when it comes to the shtar kabbalas acherim garmalo. When it comes to the shtar, the master isn't the one who's making it happen. The master gives the shtar, but unless you have somebody accepting it, it doesn't do anything. So it's when the recipient accepts it, that's where it takes effect. So that's where we say that only he could be the one to accept it. Others can't accept it against his will, because it's a detriment to him. And they can't do something that's a detriment to him against his will. So that's why when it comes to the document, Rava says only he could accept it. When it comes to the money, since the master is accepting the money that creates that sets the slave free, so that's within the power of the master to do, and that's why even if others give the money against the slave's will, it works. Okay, now the Mishnah continued, and it said, the Chachamim say, B'kesef al yidei atzmo, u'b'shtar al yidei atzmo, u'b'shtar al yidei acherim. So the Chachamim said the opposite. The Chachamim said, when it comes to money, he can only be freed al yidei, or he could be freed al yidei atzmo, if he gives the money. When it comes to shtar, the document, he can be freed al yidei acherim. He could be freed even if you give the document to others. So what are the Chachamim talking about? Says the Gemara, B'kesef al yidei atzmo. They said that he could be freed by money, by himself, if he gives the money. It sounds like al yidei atzmo in, al yidei acherim lo. It sounds like if he pays the money, he could be freed, but if others pay the money, he can't be freed. Amai, why not? Nehi nami d'shalomi daito, even though it's against his will, or even if we're talking about where it's against his will, he never consented. But let's examine this. Shamana l'hu l'rabbanan, we've heard that the Rabbanan hold, we know that the Rabbanan hold, that it's actually a merit, it is an award for a person to be able to be freed, for a Canaanite slave to be freed. Yeah, he loses out on his ability to eat truma if his master was a Kohen, he loses out on his ability to marry a maidservant, but there's, a lot of pros to being freed. So the Chachamim actually say that it is a merit. V'tanina, and we know from a brisa, zachin l'adam shelo b'fanav. You're allowed to award someone without them knowing, without their consent. Ve'ein chavin lo ela b'fanav. But you can't obligate someone except for in front of them. So the Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim hold that it's actually a good thing. It's a positive thing. It's an award, a zechus, a merit for the slave to be freed. And if that's the case, then you should be able to free him without his consent. Again, I was using the words against his will earlier. That's not really the best word. It's really without his consent. If it's against his will, that's a different story. If he has expressed, that he doesn't want this. But if he hasn't expressed that, and we just don't know, it's shalom idaito, it's without him knowing, without his consent, so then we assume yes, and zachin l'adam shelo b'fanav, you could award him not in front of him. So why would the Chachamim say that only he could give the money? Others should also be able to give the money, because it's a good thing for him. And they should be able to do it even without him knowing. V'chiteiman, if you'll tell me, mai shelo b'fanav, mai al yidei atzmo, you'll tell me what does it mean when it says that he can free himself with money by himself? Maybe it means af al yidei atzmo. Maybe it means even by himself. Certainly others can do it. But even he could do it. Why do we say even him? What's the chiddush? What's novel about that? The kamash malan, it would be teaching me yesh kinyan le'eved below rabbo. It would be teaching me that it's possible for the slave to get possession of money without it becoming his master's. And the case would be, I guess, where somebody gives it to him on condition that it doesn't belong to his master. But the Chachamim could be saying, certainly someone else could free him. It's a merit for him. And they have money. It's their money. But even he could free himself. How does he have money? It's possible for him to have money. It's possible for a slave to have money. If somebody gives it to him on condition that it won't belong to the master. Then it remains by the slave. So maybe that's what they're saying. Certainly others can free him with money. Even he could free himself with money. But if that's true, ema seifa, what about, let's read the seifa. Let's read the next part of the Mishnah. The Chachamim said that bishtar al yidei achirim v'lo al yidei atzmo. The Chachamim said that when you are freeing the slave with a shtar, with a document, it's al yidei achirim. Others can accept the document for him, implying, but not al yidei atzmo, but not himself. V'akaimalan, but why not? We hold, and this is we just know, this the Gemara is saying, everybody knows, Degito v'yado bayin ka'echad, that the regular practice, this is maisim b'chol yom, everybody does this is how we paskin, and the Chachamim seemingly, as the majority would be in line with how we paskin. We know that this concept that I mentioned before, Gito v'yado bayin ka'echad, that it's possible for a slave to be freed by receiving a document. How does it work? Well, it's this simultaneous thing. He takes possession at the same time as he gets freed. So he's able to take possession because he's being freed at the same time. So if that's the case, so maybe that's what it's saying. Oh, sorry, no. So I don't understand the seifa the Gemara is saying. The seifa says he could accept the shtar al yidei achirim. Others can accept the shtar for him, but he can't. What do you mean he can't? Everybody knows he could. That's gito v'yado bayin ka'echad. Like you have this idea that you could accept it simultaneously with him being freed, and that's what we do. And the Chachamim seemingly would hold of that. V'chitema. And if you'll tell me maya yidei achirim af al yidei achirim, maybe what it means is certainly he could accept the document. But the Chachamim are coming to tell you that even others could accept the document on his behalf. And what would it be telling me? It would be telling me it would be telling me that it's a merit, it's a good thing for him to go free. And that's what it's teaching me. By teaching me then not only can he accept the shtar, but even others could. What do you mean even others? Why would I have thought they can't? I would have thought that maybe they can't, because maybe it's a detriment to him. It's teaching me, no, it's a positive thing, it's a good thing. Maybe that's what it's saying. When the Mishnah says that he could be freed with the shtar al yidei acherim, by the acceptance of others, maybe it means even others. Ihachi, but if that's the case, na'arvinu v'nisninu, then it should have mixed them and taught them. Bekesef uvishtar, with money and a document, being al yidei acherim, being al yidei atzmo. Whether through others, whether by himself. Because at this point, the way we're suggesting it right now, is it's coming out that whether it's with money, whether it's a document, either way, he could be freed both on his own or with others. So if that's the case, why is the Mishnah splitting it? The Mishnah is saying he could be freed with money on his own, and certainly from others, and he could be freed with a document from others, when others accept it, and certainly if he accepts it, well then all the cases are covered. It should have just put them together and said, a slave could be freed with money or with a shtar, whether from others, whether from himself. That's what it should have said, but it didn't. It broke them up. It only spoke about, according in the Chachamim, it only said he could be freed with money by himself, he could be freed with a document from others accepting it. So what's going on here? So the Gemara says, Ella, so rather, B'kasef, being al yidei acherim, being al yidei atzmo. What we have to say is that when it comes to money, he could be freed whether he gives it, whether others give it. And it will be teaching me that even he's able to give the money because he's able to actually possess money. And bishtar, then the next step of the Mishnah would be that when it comes to a document, al yidei acherim v'lo al yidei atzmo, the way that it's expressed in the Mishnah is only others can receive the document, but he can't accept the document. Why not? What about Gito v'yado b'ayin ke'echad? I thought he could accept the document. We say everybody knows that. That's what everybody does all the time. So you have to say, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, you have to say that this last opinion, this last point is going in the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who disagrees. We don't paskin like him, and that's why Ma'asim b'chol yom, slaves are set free in this manner, because we go like the Chachamim. But it could be that the end of the Mishnah is Reb Shimon ben Elazar. The Tanya, because we're learning a Mishnah in a Brisa. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Reb Shimon ben Elazar says, Af bishtar, even when it comes to a document, al yidei acherim v'lo al yidei atzmo. Only others can accept the document, but he cannot. V'shalosh machlokos b'davar. And there will be three opinions here. We'll come back to the three opinions in a moment, but let's just do one more line. Amar Rabba said, my time of Reb Shimon ben Elazar. What is Reb Shimon ben Elazar's reason? Why does he disagree? Why does he say that an Eved cannot be freed with a document? Why don't we say this idea, this novel idea of Gito v'yado b'ayin ke'echad, his bill of freedom and his freedom and his ability to accept it, his yad, his ability to take possession, come at the same time. So the Gemara says, Gamar la me isha. He learns a gezerah shava of a la from an isha, from a woman. Because there's a pasuk in the concept of setting a maidservant free that says la to her, and there's the pasuk when it comes to divorcing a woman that it says because of la, you should write for her a get. So we learn a la, we learn to compare them. And ma isha ad sheyotzi get l'rishus she'ena shelo. Just like when a man divorces his wife, he has to take the get and place it in a place that doesn't belong to him. It's no longer his rishus. So either in her hands or in her domain. But it can't be in his rishus anymore. It can't be in his domain. So af eved nami ad sheyotzi get l'rishus she'ena shelo. Says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, the same is true for an eved, for a slave. You can't free him unless you place that get unless the master places the get, the bill of divorce, the bill of separation, of freedom, in a place that doesn't belong to him. That's what it's teaching me. And the Eved's hands, the slave's hands, belong to him right now. So that's, says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, that's not going to work. If he wants to use a get, a shtar, to free the slave, he has to give it to someone else. It has to be out of his possession, out of the master's possession. And the Chachamim, the Rabbanim who disagree, they said, no, that's not what you learn with this Keseder Shava. Rashi explains, the last Rashi on the page, Rashi says that they would say that what it's teaching you is actually the opposite. Just like a wife can accept her own get, so too an Eved can accept his own get. And therefore, they say, yeah, he could. And how does it work? This novel idea of Gito v'yado bayin ke'echad, that his hand and his ability to possess and his freedom come simultaneously. And that's how he could possess it, because he's being freed at the same time. Now the Gemara had said that there are shalosh machokos b'davar. The Gemara said there's really 3 opinions here. So what are the 3 opinions? So Rashi breaks it down for us. We have the first opinion in the Mishnah, that's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir held that when it comes to kesef, when it comes to using money, so others can free him with money, and that's even against his will. Even against his will, others could free him. The Gemara had 2 possible reasons for that. One was because just like the master took possession of him against his will, he could sell him against his will. The other was like Rava, that it's the master's, the acceptance of the money is what really matters here, and he could do that against the Eved's will. So Rabbi Meir holds when it comes to others paying money, they could free the slave, whether, again, not against his will, but, well, I guess sometimes against his will. Certainly without his consent, maybe even against his will. So that's Rabbi Meir. Like, others can give money and free the slave without his consent, and maybe even against his will. However, he can never free himself with his own money, because he can't have money, according to Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir holds. So that would be whether he can't free himself, because he can't take possession of money. The last opinion we had is Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Reb Shimon ben Elazar holds that others can free him whether with a document or whether with money, and they hold that it's a good thing. It's a zechus for him. That's why others can do it, and they can do it with money or with a shtar. But he can't do it neither with money nor with a shtar. Reb Shimon ben Elazar says he can't do it with money because he agrees to Rabbi Meir that he can't have any money. An Eved can't get possession of any money. He can't be freed with a shtar. Rabbi Meir holds he could be freed with a shtar because of this idea of Gito v'yado bayin ke'echad, that his get and his hand, his ability to possess, come at the same time. He could accept the document, but Reb Shimon ben Elazar says he can't accept the document, and so he can never free himself. Not by paying money, because he can't have money. Not by accepting a shtar, because he can't accept a shtar. He can never possess it. That is the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Elazar, but others could free him because it's a merit for him. And the third opinion is what we had as the middle opinion, is the opinion of the Chachamim, and they hold that when using money, others can free him because it's a merit for him, it's a good thing for him. He can free himself because he could take possession of money if somebody gives it to him on condition that the master won't have it. And also with the shtar, also both work. Others could accept the shtar because it's a merit for him, it's a zechus for him, and he could accept the shtar because the Chachamim hold that it's Gito v'yado bayin ke'echad, that he's able to, like we said, this is Ma'aseh b'chol yom, this is what everybody does, and that's because we paskin like the Chachamim, that he's able to accept the document, and he gains the ability to accept the document as he accepts it simultaneously. And we say Gito v'yado bayin ke'echad, his ability to possess comes simultaneous with his ability to, with his freedom, which gives him the ability to possess it. It's this like circular thing, but it works according to the Chacham. It also works according to Rabbi Meir. It doesn't work according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Okay, we'll pick up from here next week in Reit Hashem.